everybody. I want to talk today about contracts, and the warning at the beginning is I'm not an actual attorney, although I have stayed at a Holiday Inn Express. But I want to talk less from a legal standpoint and more from a practical standpoint. One of the great pieces of advice that was given to me a few years ago, many years ago when I first started in the business, was from a local DJ. And we were talking about what things to put in the contract. And he said something that always stuck with me, which was, I'm not going to put everything in my contract that could ever go wrong, no matter how small it is, because it just bogs down the contract. And I think that's really solid advice, that what we do sometimes is a thing goes wrong somewhere and we put it in our contract, out of anger or whatever, so that never happens again. But ultimately, is it really worth telling 1,000 clients about this thing that happens once in 1,000 times? And when it happens, it's a mild inconvenience. So I know a lot of DJs put in food, that they will be fed, or that they'll be fed the same food as the wedding party, right? Things like that. To me, that's unnecessarily bogging it down. Listen, you're welcome to your own opinion on this. But for me, what's important in a contract is how much they're going to pay us, when they're going to pay us, what happens if they don't pay us, if they cancel, and what services we're providing. That's what the contract is. Putting in there, that I must have a table, I don't think does any good. Keep in mind that most people don't really read that contract other than the key parts. When they do, they read your contract now, and then their event is a year from now. And I see all the time on social media people saying, it's even in my contract, and it'll be some obscure thing that the couple or that the venue or whoever didn't honor. But it was buried with so many other things. For me, for example, I don't even put power requirements, and I know that's a really big deal. And I think if you're a production company, that would be different. But if you're a DJ, for me, I'm either will have already played the place before, or if I haven't played the place before, I'm always going to do a site inspection. Putting in your contract that nothing else can be on your circuit, no coffee pots or heaters or that kind of stuff. The problem with putting that in your contract is you put that in a year ago, and it's unenforceable, really. I mean, what's the point of it being in the contract? The key then is to make sure when you're doing your planning with the venue and with your client that you cover those kinds of things, and that whenever possible, you make sure that you're responsible for anything. So I would never, for example, tell people to provide me with extension cords in my contract. Now, I do bring a lot of extension cords. We do a lot of outdoor events. When I go to a house, I will talk to the people about providing power to our location if there isn't one there. But I have enough extension cord to get there if they don't provide it to me, or if they provide me, 150 feet of lamp cord extension cords to get there, which I know is not going to work. But the only reason I ask them to do it is so I don't have to clean up all the extension cords afterwards. If they don't, it's not the end of the world. So what prompts this is I saw a post the other day where somebody asked what you do if somebody has it was something with a gun and a concealed carry thing, and how would you put that in your contract? And I'm like, you just wouldn't. I mean, that's a one in a zillion thing. It's like, why don't you put in your contract, you may not shoot the DJ, right? I mean, it doesn't do any good, and it bogs it down. And ultimately, and I've talked about this before, is if you ever end up in court, one of the keys to winning is to have a really simple, plain, something that cannot be misunderstood contract. So when is the money due? What happens if they cancel? What happened? And, we have that whole debate, never call it a deposit. I can tell you that I call ours a deposit, non-refundable deposit, and I've won with that in court, because the key is, what is the understanding between the client and the service provider? And as long as everybody, you can call the deposit Steve if you want, it doesn't really matter. What matters is, what was the understanding between the parties? And if you have a 7-page contract and that's buried on page 4, subparagraph 2C, it's much more difficult to win that in court. But if you have a plain, simple contract and there's only a couple of things in there, it's really easy to review. So I'm over my minute for the first time in a week. So think about what's really in your contract, what really needs to be in your contract, and other things like food. Have a question and answer sheet that you give them. What about feeding the DJ? You can put all those kinds of things in frequently asked questions. Food is great if you have an opportunity to feed us, but from our perspective, oftentimes we didn't even get a chance to eat. I hated the idea of them spending $60 a head on our staff and we never even got a chance to eat. So put in what is important, but decide what's really important. And do you need 1,000 people to see something that's going to happen once in 1,000 times? And that once in 1,000 times causes you 10 minutes of inconvenience. Hope that helps you. I'm glad you're all getting back to work. We'll see you next week.